Hospitals have a way of sanding down the edges of noise. Machines hum in measured syllables. Shoes whisper on waxed floors. Even the city outside seems to lower its voice out of respect for the fragile line between fear and relief inside. Naomi Hart sat propped against the stiff pillows, one palm pressed to the roll and flutter of 8 months beneath her gown, counting the beeps as if they were proof of a promise. The morning's bleed had stopped. The obstetrician had said stable, with the calm finality that buys you one more night of sleep. That should have been enough. When the door opened, the quiet broke like glass. Cassian Vale didn't belong to soft light or quiet anything. He wore power like a second skin, black suit absorbing the room, a metallic glint at his wrist, a phone he couldn't stop palming. CEO of Valecore. Magazines called him the builder of skylines. Naomi used to call him simply Cass. Today his jaw was wire. His eyes landed on her belly, skittered away, slid to the window where the city ran like code, numbers and deals stacked to the horizon. "You're here," Naomi said, and she meant it as welcome and anchor. "The doctor said we're okay. Scare's over." Cassian didn't look at her. "Don't talk about houses," he said, though she hadn't yet. The words were a snarl caught in velvet. Not now. The dream they had adored and fed nightly, an acre of grass in Westchester, a porch swing, a golden dog that would try to keep up with a toddler's feet, floated between them, suddenly uninvited. Naomi frowned. "I didn't. Cass, what's wrong? You've been a ghost for weeks." "Meetings," he said. "Investors. Things you can't." His hand kept raking his hair, a tell Naomi had learned in the early days when he still let her see he was human. "Just stop asking, please." "I'm not asking for more," she said, steadying her voice like a tray at a crowded party. "I'm asking for the truth you promised me, our home. You said the down payment was already—" "Shut up!" The word hit first. The hand followed. A whiplash arc, a flash of wedding band gold. The sound like a book smacked flat on a desk. Heat bloomed across Naomi's cheek, hot and tidal. And yet it was the look in Cassian's eyes that hurt worse. Not rage, terror. He held his breath like a man who hears water rising on the other side of a door. The monitor hiccuped, then steadied. A nurse in the doorway gasped. An orderly froze. Naomi's hand came up to her cheek, not to soothe it, but to make sure she hadn't imagined crossing into an uglier world. Her baby rolled under her palm as if to say, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here." Her mouth tasted like coins. Cassian's raised hand fell, slow, horrified by its own existence. Naomi!" He took a half step toward her, then away. The phone in his other hand buzzed and buzzed like a trapped fly. He flinched at the nurse's voice, firm with a courage all nurses learn. "Sir, you need to leave." For a heartbeat, Naomi thought he would collapse into apology. She would have preferred fury. Fury you can hammer into shape. Instead, his face closed like a vault. "Fix this," he said to no one human, to the universe of problems he'd once been able to bill away. "I have work." The door eased shut behind him, soft as a verdict. The nurse checked Naomi's vitals. The baby thumped an indignant heel. "Do you want to press charges?" the nurse asked gently. Naomi shook her head, because there were bigger crimes in the room, and they didn't leave bruises. As the nurse adjusted the monitor and murmured the compassion of professionals, warm, practiced, necessary, the lawyer part of Naomi's brain, the part she'd shelved when she left her firm to build a family, sat up and put on its glasses. He is afraid of a question. Which question? Money. Houses are just buildings with money inside them. She waited until the hallway swallowed the last of Cassian's shoe sounds. Then, with the slow deliberation of a woman who will not break in front of her child, she reached for her phone and signed into the account she had signed out of when we had replaced I. The home fund was empty, not low, empty. Transfers she didn't recognize jittered down the screen. Consulting retainers, private jet leases, repayments to structures with numb names, Veristep Holdings, Kira Point Advisors, shells if she'd ever cross-examined one. Her cheek burned. Her throat cooled. She scrolled faster. Offshore wires winked like lures. A name repeated across the ledger like a watermark. Ronan Pike. When Naomi had still been at the firm, Pike had been legend and rumor, a rescuer of distressed companies who never left without a deed to the place he'd saved. Fear was a useful emotion if you drilled it into a question. Why would a man who could buy a small country slap his wife rather than answer whether a porch swing existed? Because the lie behind the porch swing was bigger than a backyard. Naomi closed her eyes. She saw garden party chandeliers lit like interrogations. She heard Cassian's mother's careful smile sharpened into courtesy. She remembered his father's sentence dressed as advice. She's too sharp for her own good, son. Not warning. Diagnosis. Her baby pressed a foot to her palm. Naomi pressed back. I hear you, she whispered. I'm here. She tapped open another portal, Valecor's public filings, then what her old network still let her see beneath them. Revenues that rose like a staircase drawn by someone guessing, debt hidden where no one would casually look. In the signature blocks, Cassian Vale, and above him in the shadows of advisory notes, never in ink but evident in pressure, Ronan Pike. The nurse dimmed the lights. Try to rest. Naomi nodded and looked out at the city Cassian had once promised her they'd sail, not drown in. She touched the heat in her cheek and memorized the feeling, not to keep the pain, to keep the oath it forged. She was done waiting for explanations. In the morning, she would ask someone who had never lied to her for help. And today, this hour, while the beeps held steady and the baby yawned a sleepy elbow against her skin, she opened a blank note and wrote a list. Ronan Pike, Lena Cho, Valecor's CFO, internal audit calendar, trust accounts, prenup language, contingency plan. At the bottom, she wrote 3 words in a hand that did not tremble. Pull the thread. Morning laid a pale square of light across Judge Alistair Hart's desk. Naomi's father had retired from the bench, but not from his habits. Sharpened pencils in a short tumbler, legal pads ribboned with neat columns, the kind of patience that makes liars talk. He listened while Naomi told him everything, starting not with the slap, but with the more dangerous assault on the accounts, the house, the truth. Do you want me to file? He asked when she finished, voice as even as his verdicts used to be. Not yet, Naomi said. He's wrong, but he's not my enemy. Ronan Pike is. Alistair steepled his fingers. Then we build a case that holds whether or not Cassian decides to be a man. He slid a pad toward her. Tell me the names again. She wrote Ronan Pike and Lena Cho, and the shell entities that move like shadows around the money. Alistair marked dates, matched handwriting with his daughter, made small frowns when anger tried to tip the pen. You'll need internal documents, he said. Policy memos, emails, board minutes, something with edges. Do you have an ally inside? Naomi thought of Valecor galas where conversation sparkled and loyalty weighed itself against ambition like gold dust in a scale. Lena Cho had been the CFO who somehow staved off crisis with a half smile and a spreadsheet. Sharp, reserved. Loyal, but to what? Maybe, Alistair nodded once. Don't meet her in your world or Cassian's. Meet her in a place where cash has no power. Then make her a better offer than fear. Naomi chose a corner table at a bakery that survived not on influencers, but on crust. Lena arrived 10 minutes early and studied the exit before ordering tea. I have 6 minutes, she said, sliding into the chair across from Naomi without softening her posture. If this is about Cass's personal accounts, I can't. It's about Ronan Pike, Naomi said. Something flickered in Lena's eyes. A small, tired light that knew the shape of the cage it sat in. You're not the first spouse to come fishing for names. I'm not fishing. I'm building a lifeboat big enough for 2, Naomi said. You and me on one side, Pike on the other. Lena held her tea around the middle, seeking warmth. You have the wrong villain, Naomi. Distressed companies don't call Ronan Pike. He calls them. He loans you a lifeline, and you sign your name with blood. Cassian did. I saw the transfers, the shells, the offshore wires. This porch swing has no nails because the nails are in a Cayman account with your countersignature. Procedure, Lena murmured, automatic. Then a softer admission. Coercion dressed as procedure. She looked at Naomi the way a diver looks up to see if the surface is still there. What do you want? Proof of instruction, Naomi said. Not just that money moved, but that Pike ordered it. Emails, memos, texts, board directives drafted outside the board. I want the puppet strings on paper. Lena laughed once, a sound with no humor in it. He doesn't write "do fraud" in the subject line. I don't need the commandment. I need the implication plus the effect, Naomi said. You know where they live. Lena stared into her tea as if numbers could steep. You left a good firm to follow a man. Why aren't you angrier? Naomi placed one hand on her belly. Anger is a flame. I prefer electricity. It moves quieter and lights the whole house. They talk terms like two people making a bridge out of boards they hadn't tested. Lena would send copies from a clean device to a private inbox Alistair had secured. Naomi would file with the SEC Whistleblower program through counsel unaffiliated with her father to avoid obvious threads. Alistair would place an anonymous packet into the hands of Vailcor's most independent board member, Amal Reyes, whose disgust for corporate theater was a secret only to people who didn't read her eyes. Pike is accelerating something, Lena warned, standing. He's pulled forward a liquidity event. That's code for sell the furniture before the fire marshal arrives. Whoa. He will try to oust Cassian to distance himself from the mess, then flip the company to a buyer who likes distressed inventory and doesn't mind scorch marks. How long? 2 weeks, maybe less. Then we move now, Naomi said. At Alistair's house that night, they spread documents like cards. Lena's emails showed what Naomi needed, a tone. Per the conversation, execute the movement via ChiroPoint, then we'll true up optics post-quarter. Recast the recognition? Optics matter. Get him to sign. A chat log scrubbed of names but not of intent. He hesitates. Then remind him who owns his default. A signed side letter that made Naomi curse softly. The kind of instrument you only sign when a man with a ledger shows you a cliff. This is enough to trigger an internal audit with teeth, Alistair said, sliding 2 emails in the side letter into an envelope bound for Amal Reyes. And enough for the SEC to begin an inquiry the moment we file. Naomi typed her submission with the precision Alistair had taught her and the mercy she had learned the hard way. She didn't sand her husband's name out of it. She didn't sharpen it either. She told the truth. She attached proof. She held back nothing that would keep Pike on his perch. When she finished, Alistair slid a copy of her prenup across the desk. Protection, he said. We'll move your separate assets into a shield Pike can't pierce if Cassian tries to make his problems your roof. And Naomi, he hesitated, those rare seconds when a father has to ask a judge for permission to speak. Do you want me to begin a restraining order? Naomi's palm found the cool of her healing cheek. Not yet, she said. He is drowning and he panicked. That is explanation, not excuse. If he lifts his hand again, I will lift the law. For now, I need him to do one thing only. What? Tell the truth in a room where lying is a language. The room arrived sooner than anyone planned. Vailcor called an emergency board meeting to discuss leadership alignment ahead of strategic alternatives. Corporate for what Lena had translated, remove the man, keep the machine, sell the carcass. Naomi dressed as if she were going to court because she was. She didn't sit in the boardroom. She waited 2 blocks away in a coffee shop with Alistair's phone on the table and the SEC on a line that would open if Amal texted a single word. Now. Before she left the apartment, she wrote Cassian one email. It contained no accusation, no drama, just 3 sentences and 4 attachments. Cass, I submitted evidence to the SEC. Amal Reyes has what she needs to start an internal audit. Below are the documents that show Ronan Pike using your signature as his weapon. You can keep lying for him, or you can come back to your own name. If you love our child, choose the second. N, she hit send. Then she put her hand on the small swell that felt like sunrise and waited to see whether a man who had built a skyline could stand on his own floor without a con. The boardroom was glass and edges and the kind of expensive quiet that wants to be mistaken for wisdom. Amal Reyes took her seat with the posture of a person who had never been impressed by a chandelier. The others arranged themselves in tribal clumps. Cassian stood at the head of the table, not quite centered. He looked like a man who had just sprinted through rain and pretended he hadn't. Ronan Pike was not a board member. He never was. He sat anyway, near the window, where the city made him look inevitable. Let's begin, Amal said. No one had elected her to chair this meeting. Rooms like this elect their own chair. It is the person who doesn't pretend. Vailcore must consider a change, said a director whose ties were expensive and convictions cheap. We respect Mr. Vale's vision, but the recent volatility. Volatility, Pike murmured, amused. You mean gravity. Gravity happens. The company needs adult supervision. Which is you, Amal said, flat as ground. You've supervised us into an audit. Eyebrows ticked up. No one had said audit into the air yet. That word carried weight even Glass respected. Pike's mouth smiled. His eyes did not. An audit clarifies. It doesn't condemn. It condemns when it finds condemnation, Amal said. She folded her hands. Before we vote on leadership, I want to hear from Mr. Vale. Cassian looked down the table the way a defendant looks into a gallery to see if the one person who taught him right and wrong has come. He found no one there. He found instead a USB drive warm in his pocket and an email hot in his mind. You can keep lying for him, or you can come back to your own name. He cleared his throat. The audit will find irregularities, he said. Around the table, throats tightened, pens hovered. Those irregularities were not accidents. They were instructions. Pike laughed, soft and sharp. Careful, Cass, you're tired. Men say things when they're tired. I've been tired for 2 years, Cassian said. He took out the USB drive and slid it to Amal. Ms. Reyes, that contains emails and side letters. It shows a pattern, money moved off balance sheet by design, revenue recognized prematurely for optics, a network of entities used to shroud liability. I signed. I failed. But I did not invent the method. Who ordered the method? Amal asked. Cassian looked directly at Pike. It was a small act, but it made a noise in the room. Ronan Pike. Pike's smile changed temperature. Defamation is a poor divestment strategy. Truth is not defamation, Amal said, already plugging in the drive. The screen on the end wall filled with emails Naomi had memorized. Recast the recognition. Move the funds via Kira Point. He hesitates. Remind him who owns his default. The side letter, an elegantly cruel instrument, informed the board's counsel more loudly than Cassian's voice could. Amal scrolled, and so did every director's pulse. Pike didn't look at the screen. He studied Cassian, then tilted his head. You were eager, boy. Don't pretend otherwise. You wanted to be king of a hill you couldn't afford to climb. I gave you rope. You chose the knot. Cassian thought of Naomi's cheek, the red he had caused blooming behind his ribs. I chose a woman, he said quietly. Then I chose fear. I'm finished with fear. Outside, Naomi's phone buzzed once with a single word from Amal. Now. Alistair placed a call that had been waiting in his drafts, and a hum began on a floor 6 blocks away. In the room with the long table, Amal closed the laptop. We are adjourned for the moment, she said with an authority the lighting couldn't lend. We will reconvene when counsel finishes a review. Mr. Pike, please remain available. Of course, Pike said, as if called to his yacht. Except the door opened not to a yacht, but to 3 people whose suits didn't advertise their tailors and whose badges did their own speaking. Mr. Pike, the lead asked. Am I under arrest? Pike asked, already performing. You're being detained pending investigation for securities fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction, the agent said, voice without a single thrill in it. You'll have counsel. Pike turned toward Cassian, and for a moment the room watched a predator look at meat and understand the cow had finally found a fence. You made a friend at the commission, he said, zeroing in on where the rope had burned him. Who was it? Your retired judge of a father-in-law? Or your little wife with the lawyer's teeth? My wife, Cassian said. It wasn't a boast. It was a confession. He put his hands on the table to keep them from shaking. She told the truth. I'm following her. The agents left with Pike. The door swung shut with the soft decisiveness of good hinges. The board erupted into a dozen whispering committees. Amal stood and looked at Cassian. You will step aside, she said, not unkindly. You will cooperate completely. If you try a single trick, I will pin it through the glass so the city can see it from every bridge. I will cooperate, Cassian said. His phone vibrated. He didn't need to read it to know what it would say. He had learned finally the geometry of consequences. Minutes later, on a sidewalk 2 blocks away, he read Naomi's message anyway. You did the right thing. It doesn't fix us. It does fix you. Don't stop. He leaned against the rough certainty of a building and let the exhaustion have him. The skyline he had drawn with lies would hold for exactly as long as truth required it to collapse. You don't know how heavy a name is until you take off the part that isn't yours. The weeks that followed rewrote Cassian's biography faster than his PR team could spell context. Vailcor's stock staggered. Amal took interim control with a surgeon's cold. The board called in external counsel who didn't speak Chandelier. The SEC opened a formal investigation. The U.S. Attorney's Office stopped being a rumor. Cassian gave them everything: emails, passwords, meetings he had lied about to Naomi and to himself. Cooperating didn't unbreak what he'd broken. It simply faced the wrong direction and began to walk. Naomi did not visit him at Vailcor. She sent her lawyer when a signature was required and Alistair when a line needed drawing in firmer ink. She moved her separate assets behind protections she should have insisted on the day love made her think contracts were rude. She went to her OB appointments with a different friend and watched each time as their daughter kicked a rhythm against ultrasound gel, impatient to write her own name on the world. In the middle of all the collapse, life insisted on making itself known. Naomi went into labor in a storm that washed the billboards clean. The nurses in the delivery room had hands that knew how to hold a woman wide open and unafraid. Alistair stood outside with a paperback he didn't read. Naomi breathed as if exhaling could erase the moment in the hospital room when she learned fear could wear a suit. Her daughter arrived with a cry that sounded like a promise and a complaint. Naomi laughed through tears. "Maya," she whispered, "because names can be bridges too." The nurse placed the warm weight of a future against Naomi's chest, and the world recalibrated. A week later, Naomi signed the SEC complaint in her own name, no longer anonymous. Fear likes shadows. Light makes it small. Amal's internal report landed with surgical clarity. The Department of Justice announced charges against Ronan Pike. The press took photos of a man who had invented his own gravity, discovering the physics of handcuffs. Cassian pled to what matched the truth. Cooperation bought him years he would spend differently. Naomi didn't attend the sentencing. She took Maya to the park and narrated the way light finds leaves. She was done making monuments of men's mistakes. 2 years passed, quiet and loud in the ways that matter. Naomi founded a small law practice and an education nonprofit in the same breath. A place where couples learned how to talk about money before it turned into secrets, and a clinic for women entrepreneurs who had been told to sign the bottom and smile for the camera. She made policies that felt like railings. She turned her own story into a guardrail others could hold. Alistair babysat like a general who secretly loves finger paint. Maya learned to run before she learned to accept that stares demand respect. The world kept trying to sell Naomi new versions of her old dream. She built a better one in a smaller space with bigger windows. A letter arrived every few months, narrow cursive on paper that felt purchased by a commissary. Cassian wrote about accounting classes he taught to men who had never been offered a ledger except as a weapon. He wrote about a restitution fund that his lawyers and Amal had structured to actually pay the injured first. He wrote once about the day he finally said his own crime out loud to a room of men who knew the taste, how the room didn't hate him for it. It nodded. He didn't ask for Naomi. He asked once if she would tell Maya one sentence when the child was old enough. "Your father stopped lying." Naomi folded that one and put it where a future could find it. On an afternoon that smelled like rain flirting with pavement, Naomi pushed Maya on a swing in the park. "Higher," her daughter commanded, as if the sky were taking too long. Naomi obliged. A woman nearby asked Naomi how she had started her clinic. "I needed it, and it didn't exist," Naomi said. And they both laughed at how obvious survival can sound. Phone buzz. News alert. Ronan Pike sentenced to 14 years, ordered to forfeit assets routed through Kira Point and Veristep. Naomi didn't smile exactly. She let the news pass through her and out, like a breath she had been holding without knowing. Justice is not joy. It is the temperature at which healing can start. That evening, after dinner, where Maya declared herself queen of broccoli, Naomi opened the last letter she had received from Cassian and read it fully for the first time. "Naomi, I used to measure my life in square footage and multiples. Now I measure by whether the men in this room leave 1 hour more prepared to be honest than they arrived. It is the only multiple that makes sense. I am not asking for anything. I am writing to say you were the first honest thing I ever had, and I'm sorry I used fear to keep you near. I am trying to be a man our daughter could meet without needing an apology first. If the law gives me back a portion of my time, I will live it small and true. If it doesn't, I will live the same. Thank you for turning on the light. Naomi closed her eyes. The anger that had kept her back straight during the worst days stepped aside to let something older stand there. The knowledge that survival is not the same as cynicism. She would tell Maya that sentence when the day came. She would also tell her daughter the one sentence that changed a boardroom. Truth is not defamation. She would teach her to sign her name and mean it. On Maya's third birthday, Amal stopped by the party with a paper crown and a practical gift, a savings bond in a folder labeled with a child's future. She stayed long enough to watch Maya blow out candles and attempt to negotiate for more frosting. She has your eyes, Amal said to Naomi, and your spine. Ah, spine is inherited, Alistair said from the sink, where he was losing a battle with icing. But it's also taught. After the guests left and sleep finally found a toddler wired on sugar and victory, Naomi stood at the window of the small apartment that had never lied to her and looked at a skyline that no longer felt like a verdict. She thought of the night in the hospital when a slap cracked her certainty open. Pain had tried to become the thesis of her life. She had refused to let it. She texted a single line to a number the warden's office would print and hand to a man who had learned to count differently. Maya laughed so hard she snorted when she blew out 3 candles today. She is brave. She is loved. I will tell her the sentence when it is time. A minute later, a reply came through the relay. Thank you. Keep building the house you promised yourself. I am, Naomi said aloud to the quiet apartment, to the city, to a daughter sleeping like a conspiracy of joy down the hall. I am. And because stories are also railings, she wrote this last line for the women who would watch and listen and need a sentence to hold when the room goes quiet and someone tells them to stop asking. Pull the thread, then follow it, even if it leads you through the room with the long table. Especially then,